evening. Today's subject on which I wish to address is a very contemporary and relevant subject, which is, in fact, now even being discussed in the interministerial working group and also in the G20 presidency meetings. The subject here before us is the significance of global collaboration in advancing renewable energy initiatives with an Indian outlook. Very thought-provoking. In fact, if you want to know about the global collaboration in this aspect, I think fundamentally it will be good to take a brief look at what exactly do the renewable energy scenario fan out in the country globally, and how are they actually impacting in the primary energy mix globally as well as in Indian context. Once we understand what is the significance and what is the share out of renewable energy and how it is impacting our economy, our environment, and various other core sectors of the economy, and then go on to see how essential and a prerequisite it is for a global collaboration to make any radical or disruptive growth will be a very appropriate way of approaching the subject. So, dear friends, if we take an energy overview, we will find that India ranks among the top 10 energy consuming countries. It actually comes very next to China, USA. Now, but at the same breath, I would like to say that the energy per capita consumption of India in terms of tons of oil equivalent per person is less than half the global average. In fact, it's at par with Africa, and even countries like Brazil are double of ours. China is 3 times us, Europe is 4 times, Russia is 7 times, and US is 10 times. In other words, our oil and gas consumption per capita is 1/3 of the global average, and gas is just 1/10. Now, why am I talking about fossil fuels when there is a subject on renewable energy? Because unless you see the dark side and unless you see darkness, you cannot appreciate light or the brightness. So what is important and essential to understand is that the primary energy consumption pattern of the world, if you look at, then the fossil fuels, which are essentially the coal, oil, and gas, they roughly form about 74 to 77% of the primary energy mix, be it an advanced OECD country or be it a developing country. In fact, let me share with you that the coal in the world's primary energy basket is roughly about 27%. Though in very advanced countries like US, it may be around 11%. And in our country, it is around 44%. And if you take other like petroleum and biomass altogether, as I mentioned, it almost becomes close to 3/4 of the primary energy mix. So what are we left with? We are left with nuclear, we are left with hydropower, and we are left with renewable energy. Now, let us also have a quick look at what the renewable energy share out is. Well, it is minimal. It is growing in the recent years, but if you look at the trend, it has been very, very minimal. Now, if you see the world average, it will be around 6 to 7%. In US, an advanced country, it is around 12. And in India, it will be around 2%. So the point I'm trying to drive home is other OECD countries have developed a gas economy as an intermediate stage while transitioning from coal to renewable. So the share out of gas is roughly about 24% on a world average, whereas in India it is around 6 to 7%. So what does it all summarize to? It summarizes to the fact that we are today discussing on a subject which may not have made a significant impression in the energy mix of the world or even energy mix of the country. But why is it getting so much importance, emphasis, and focus? For the obvious reason that this is something which is sustainable, which is non-conventional, which is green, which is clean, and which it can be replenished. So these are the factors which are working in favor of renewable energy. So if we alternatively name renewable energy, we can call it green energy, we can call it clean energy, sustainable energy, non-conventional energy, and sometimes we loosely call it non-fossil. But please do remember that non-fossil and renewable energy are not exactly concomitant. In other words, this particular renewable energy will be a subset of non-fossils. So what else is there in non-fossil besides renewable energy? Solar, wind, bio. So we also have hydros, we have nuclear in the non-fossils. Now, whether nuclear is renewable or not is often debated in various forums, whereas uranium, which is the essential element for metal for the nuclear power generation, is a finite material, which is mined from Earth and hence is not a replenishable material, and also is found only in certain parts of the globe. But the energy it produces is non-toxic. Similarly, hydrogen. Hydrogen is debated as whether it is renewable or non-renewable. To the extent that it is green hydrogen, it is considered renewable. But if it is, in fact, it is considered sustainable. And if it is gray hydrogen, now what is green and gray? The green hydrogen is the hydrogen which is also produced with the help of electricity from a renewable source. In other words, suppose we are using solar energy to bring in hydrogen production, then it will be green. But if we use fossil fuels, then it will be gray. So if you really look at the total renewable energy capacity of our country today, it is roughly about 170 gigawatts, of which around 68 to 70 gigawatt is towards solar, and hydro is another 52 gigawatts, wind is around 42, and biopower is another 10. Now, as a country, we are aiming to achieve roughly 500 gigawatt by 2030, which means we are almost aiming to leapfrog from 65 gigawatt to 280 gigawatt under the solar head and 140 gigawatt on the wind, whereas the hydro and biopower is kind of not as ambitious, and the numbers will be around 20 to 25 plus to what it is today. So by doing this, there will be a reducing an emission to the extent of about intensity of about 45%. So this is how the country's mission statement of being net zero emission country by 2070 is mapped as a roadmap to be achieved. Now, so the point I'm trying to drive home here is that irrespective of the fact that renewable energy today does not occupy a very significant portion or share out or proportion of the energy, primary energy mix, but the future energy is gravitating around this subject because of the tremendous impetus that it has received from years, and more so in the recent years. So having said that, let me go into the significance of the global collaboration. Now, so global collaboration would be around what and why? In case any attempt is made to invest in renewable energy with only domestic technology or domestic funding, then the growth will be simply incremental. It cannot be radical or disruptive. So there is a need for technological advancements and mega funding. The reasons for that is that India today has made a significant impact in the various international forums as a frontrunner, which wants to fast track. The International Solar Alliance is a testimony to that fact, that in the COP21 Paris Agreement, India had taken the national determined contributions, promising to bring about 40% of the generation by 2030 to through renewable energy. It has also had a task of bringing around 475 gigawatt of energy through renewable energy by 2030. So the fact is that what kind of global collaborations are we looking at? First, let us look at the technological advancements that are happening, which also India needs to incorporate in its energy transition plan. There are advanced photovoltaics, which are doing the rounds because presently India's dependence on photovoltaics is from one singular country, neighboring country, China. Now, there is a new mineral, critical mineral, which is also making rounds in terms of an alternative to silicon. These critical materials, besides the manufacturing prowess to make wafers and modules of solar panels, is prerequisite to any attempt to make solar energy a cost-effective, commercially viable option in the country. Besides, renewable energy also has the challenge of being intermittency. It also has the challenge of distributed energy storage systems requirement. All these are adding to the cost. So to keep it cost effective and for the grid parity with other sources of energy, it has to undergo a lot of financial either subsidies or financial early market support for it to grow up in the economies of scale and then be on its own foot. While it is very promising that in the last 10 years, the leveler of cost in terms of solar has almost reduced by 85% to what it was 10 years back. And in wind, it has almost leveled by around 49 to 50%. So things are looking up. But when we take, the other associated costs which are in the ecosystem for the renewable energy like solar and even wind, the cost, which is the delivered cost, which is the dispatchable cost, that at times doesn't become very competitive. In fact, there is a new technology in terms of pumped hydro, which is also taking care of the intermittency of renewable energy. And as an alternate to battery energy storage systems. The point that is to be understood is that no singular technology or source should be made the whole sole reliance on. It is like putting all the eggs in one basket. So they all have to coexist. The important energy international agreements that have happened over the years also have, from time to time, emphasized on the fact that the artificial intelligence, the big data, the advanced robotics, or the blockchains that come up from time to time have to be shared among all the countries. The International Solar Alliance is typically an alliance of around 120 countries which are in the torrid zone. Torrid zone meaning those which lie between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn, and some others have also joined involuntarily. Now, so the point that is to be understood is that the transnational grid stability, and consistency is easier said than done. So the technology will play a tremendous role to bring in this consistency for transnational grid stability. Then the cost sharing formulas and the cost sharing frameworks, there has to be complete regulatory synchronization with the guidelines laid down by the international organizations. Now, you take the case of, if you look at history, you take the case of Montreal Protocol 1987. That was an historic event in terms of that it became the model for future diplomacy on the subject of, how to stop substances from damaging the ozone layer, the CFCs and HFCs, the carbofluorocarbons and hydrofluorocarbons and such like gases. Now, thereafter, in a few years, about 1992, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change came in, and there 197 countries signed a global treaty to address climate change. So from there was formed the annual forum of Conference of Parties, which we normally know as COP. The Conference of Parties was essentially formed to stabilize the concentration of GHGs, the greenhouse gas emissions. And from there emerged the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. So the point I'm trying to drive home is the Paris Agreements, the energy transition groups under the various international bodies have all emphasized that there has to be a technological sharing, and the technology sharing does not mean only the lending of technology, but actually absorption of an energy technology in the recipient country is very essential for them to be self-sustaining and for their such renewable projects to be viable. So the early market support in terms of technology is a must. Next is the most essential is the funds. Now, we have seen that over the years that the developed countries have fallen short in meeting their, sometime in 2009 or 10, they had made a commitment to channel around $100 billion a year up to 2020 for developing countries to help them mitigate and adapt to the climate changes. But somehow the money has not been put where the mouth is. So the fact remains that despite the United Nations intervention, despite the various multidisciplinary banks, MTBs, multidisciplinary banks are essentially, those institutional financial institutions which are formed by member countries to especially support the countries in a particular dedicated objective and wellness programs. So sustainable and renewable energy falls very much under that. But over a period of time, it has been seen that the share out of these funds were normally more by the contributor countries, and it did not percolate much to the developing countries. Of course, of late, ever since the COP26 in Glasgow, the outlook has had a tremendous sea change. And now, whether it is the global bioenergy, or it is the International Solar Alliance, or it is the wind, coastal wind, offshore wind, on such technologies, the funding that is coming from the regional development banks, the multilateral development banks, multilateral development banks, for those who are not familiar, are banks which are like the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the International Banking for Reconstruction and Development, and the European Institutional Bank, such like banks which have huge funds. United Nations has committed about $1 trillion for the towards the renewable energy projects. But the question is, it's not of the amount of fund, but the apportioning of the fund and the utilization of the fund. These are matters on which I think there needs to be more traction. In fact, I'm happy to share that G20 of late has, after India's presidency, has brought in an energy transition working group, which has invited the International Energy Agency executive director, who has come and committed several funds in terms of the projects, and also very clearly laid down the guidelines and the protocols for disbursement of the same, giving strict timelines as well. So the energy transition plan of India, which is not only restricted to renewable energy, it is also in terms of increased electrification, it is in terms of easy energy efficient technologies, in terms of digitalization and material, critical material efficiencies, which are required as raw material for various forms of renewable energy, are taking good traction. In fact, if you look at the history or the evolution of renewable energy in our country, you will find that the first steps towards wind energy was made sometime in 2001, and for biomass in 2007. But solar made some progress from 2011. But thereafter, it has now come up with a very steep up curve. So India has high solar insolation, and the land use and the land cost are very, it's very competitive as compared to the West. So even the making India the green hydrogen hub is a very sensible approach, in the sense that the OPEX costs, the operational costs of the country, are very competitive as compared to the globe. And the capex are also quite competitive. Only we need to bring in the technology, the cost-efficient technologies, And with the advantage of labor cost and OPEX and CAPEX, India can definitely become the global front runner. So this is in terms of the various renewable energy tractions. Now, if you look at the uh, resilient renewable energy supply chains which are required, you will know that the present transnational grids and cables which are being planned from Singapore to India and from India to UAE, all this require heavy investments. So whether it is export credit banks or it is multi-development banks or it is UN framework for convention on climate change, there has to be very significant, uh, focused funding and technology share. And another aspect is the socio-economic awareness, which has to be brought in all developing countries towards the benefits for the usage of non-fossil fuels and more particularly renewable energy. This is the vision, this is the mission, and this is the future. This is the crystal ball grazing that we need to do on energy. Otherwise, the writing on the wall will be that we cannot have a energy which is not sustainable, which is affordable, or which is environmentally friendly, because that kind of energy consumption, especially by the growing economies like India, will definitely not be, it will be looking after only one aspect of growth at the cost of another aspect of wellness. So this two has to go hand in hand and not in a contradictory, position. So this exact purview of international collaboration is that all the forms of renewable energy, when it is compared with the existing fossil fuel technologies and energy sources, which have long lived for decades and have actually brought us to this strength of economy to think in terms of wellness, are not very cost comparable. So over a period of time, this cost effectiveness is a must in terms of renewable energy. And then perhaps we will see that the renewable energy share out in the primary mix will grow rapidly. And once it grows rapidly, then if the Indian outlook of being a Vishwamitra in terms of a front runner and a voice of the South, not only for renewable energy, but for renewable energy finance as well, from United Nations and from various other international funding organizations, will definitely bring, a holistic growth in the globe, which will not be only materially driven, but also driven along with wellness. These two aspects are absolutely essential for, I think, any nation, and it's a bliss for the globe as well. So I hope I have been able to give you a perspective on the global collaboration that is required in advancing renewable energy, be it the technology or be the funding or the socio-economic awareness spread, which has to be undertaken by a handshaking. We should understand as a conclusion that while we may have drawn political boundaries, in the humanity has drawn the political boundaries, the environment impact are not limited by the political boundaries. If, for example, if the Brahmaputra origin in Tibet, if it is played with at that point, it will affect all the countries which are falling on the Brahmaputra basin, with the Tibet, China, or Bhutan, or India, or Bangladesh. So this is what I'm trying to mention is that the natural resources don't respect the political boundaries created by us. So somewhere we will have to break the political boundaries to ensure that these natural resources are preserved and our growth needs are fueled not through means which disturb the ecosystem or the ecology, but are friendly, environment friendly. And this may cost a little bit at the present, but with the economies of scale and with the collaboration internationally, this will bring a bliss to the humanity. Thank you.